The day my illness took a turn for the worse, Richard was out of town, fighting a divorce case for his beloved muse. He argued fervently for her in court, his phone switched off for 6 hours straight. Meanwhile, I lay on the operating table, missing the critical window for resuscitation because no one could reach my immediate family. My parents arrived just in time to collect my ashes. As Richard had wished, I was no longer a part of his life. Yet, he began praying fervently every day, hoping to see me in his dreams just once. Chapter 1. Isn't it a lawyer's duty to protect their client's interests? Emily, can you please stop being so paranoid? Richard's voice was sharp and impatient. I felt uneasy, wanting to explain that the doctors had warned me my condition could deteriorate at any moment. But Richard didn't give me a chance to speak. I'm not a doctor. What good does it do if I stay here? You're a woman too. Can you really stand by and watch Lisa lose herself in an unhappy marriage? Must you be so selfish? To be fair, Lisa's husband was a gentle man. But after Richard and Lisa's passionate affair, their mundane life of daily chores had become insufferable. Gentleness had turned into dullness. Lisa's husband and I were both seen as tasteless, dispensable burdens in their eyes. I won't interfere with your work, but Richard, couldn't the hearing be rescheduled? You once postponed a trial to attend Lisa's wedding. My illness. Before I could finish, he picked up his coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The loud bang triggered my fragile nerves, exacerbating my condition. Despite his promises to change, he never did. Just moments ago, he had criticized Lisa's husband for not remembering her allergy to early spring air, claiming he was an unfit husband. He had spent a long time telling me how much better he would treat Lisa if they were married, not noticing my pale knuckles gripping the bedsheets in pain, or the worsening reports of my condition. Maybe passing away would be a relief. I thought, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. After all, my husband was already imagining life as someone else's spouse. Chapter 2. The next morning, I was rushed into the emergency room. Where is your family? Your immediate relatives? The medical staff were frantic, but my consciousness was slipping away, and I couldn't respond. My parents lived miles away, and Richard had left in a hurry, leaving me without any support. They dialed the number Richard had left, only to hear, "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later." As my consciousness faded, I felt my soul detach from my body. It was as if I existed in a different dimension, where time and space intertwined. I could see Richard in court passionately arguing. My client's husband has never fulfilled his duties. He frequently subjected her to emotional neglect, refusing to communicate, often becoming completely unreachable. Lisa's husband looked shocked, retorting, "I've done everything I could. I have no regrets. Of course, I can't afford to buy her as many Hermes bags as you, Mr. Richard." So, all those Hermes clothes and shoes Richard bought for me were to match Lisa's bags. He had lied, claiming he didn't understand luxury brands and thought those bags were unattractive. He had even said he chose the clothes and shoes because they looked good on me. Richard's face darkened. "Don't judge our friendship with your filthy mind. If you truly loved Lisa, you would be available for her 24/7. I manage it, why can't you?" Everyone in the courtroom looked uncomfortable. The judge banged the gavel. "Counselor, stick to the facts of the case. This is a courtroom, not a place for unrelated observations." I turned back to the hospital scene. My body lay on the operating table, with no family members waiting outside. The doctor tried again to reach Richard. How could he leave his critically ill wife alone? Why isn't he answering his phone? But Richard was busy defending his muse, his phone switched off. To him, not answering calls amounted to emotional neglect. Lisa's calls, however, were always promptly answered. He had often yelled at me for interrupting his work, accusing me of being paranoid whenever I called to check on him. Now, as a mere spirit, I couldn't cry, even though I wanted to. I had no tears left. Perhaps passing away was a release, freeing me from the constant anxiety of calling Richard, only to be accused of being paranoid. Chapter 3. The next thing I saw was Richard presenting his second argument. Moreover, the couple's relationship has deteriorated. The other party is emotionally detached, failing to provide adequate care and attention to my client's physical and emotional needs. Lisa's husband was furious. For 7 years, I've handled all the housework and cooking, handed over my salary, and respected her wish not to have children. I just don't like sweet talk. Does that mean I'm uncaring? You only meet her basic material needs. Isn't she entitled to emotional support in this marriage? People are not just animals that eat, drink, defecate, and sleep. I was stunned. So, Richard believed a husband should do all this. Yet, he would collapse on the sofa every time he came home, throwing a fit if the house wasn't spotless or dinner wasn't ready. Emily, I'm exhausted from work every day. You don't work, can't you at least be a good homemaker? He wasn't a 9-to-5 office worker, his hours were unpredictable. How could I always have everything ready on time unless I contacted him first? But that would lead to more accusations of paranoia. Even my mother-in-law couldn't bear it. Richard, you married Emily. You should treat her well. Hire a housekeeper if needed and spend more time talking to her. He had retorted loudly. Every penny I earn is through hard work. Why should she get to stay home while I still have to provide emotional support? I thought he was just frugal, afraid of poverty. But if Lisa were his wife, he wouldn't have said such things. People could be so hypocritical. I had once been a top law student, even more outstanding than him. I resigned from a prestigious law firm to help him establish our practice. After years of long hours and travel, my health deteriorated. Richard suggested I stay home to recover, leaving the earning to him. Trusting him implicitly, I agreed. But he gradually changed, exploiting my lack of confidence and pushing boundaries. Seeing this scene, I realized how Richard had methodically manipulated me over the years, slowly breaking my spirit. I had once been so bright and proud. Long-term emotional abuse and isolation had turned me into this timid person. The doctor cursed. So irresponsible. Doesn't he know a terminally ill patient shouldn't be left alone? I'll get the chief to sign off, we need to operate immediately. In the courtroom, Richard was shouting at Lisa's husband. You're so irresponsible. But without solid evidence, the judge was losing patience. Lisa's husband calmly presented evidence of her possible affair with Richard. I've delayed this long just to see how shameless you can be. The evidence showed Lisa and Richard in compromising situations. Richard protested. We're just friends. But the court doesn't rely on personal claims. With the defendant presenting new evidence, the judge adjourned the trial. Lisa's husband blocked the exit. If the court rules for divorce, Lisa will be at fault. You rushed to sue me to keep her spotless. I've spent $2 million on her over the years. Pay me back, and I'll sign the divorce papers. Richard, who had always refused to hire a housekeeper for me, agreed without hesitation. I'll gather the money and transfer it to you. He was obviously guilty. Lisa clung to his arm. Richard, you're so good to me. Richard's face softened as he smiled and held her hand. It's what friends do. Using the guise of friendship to mask their affair, how despicable. Meanwhile, the loud cries from the hospital drew my attention back. Due to the delay, my surgery had failed. My body was being wheeled to the morgue, the path seeming endless. Lisa and Richard's laughter echoed in my ears. My soul was trapped in this dimension, witnessing everything. Chapter 4. The doctor tried Richard's number again. This time, he answered. Your wife. But Richard cut her off. Are doctors now checking on patients for their family? Do you know I'm in court? I'll be back in a few days. She's not a helpless child. He hung up and blocked the doctor's number. The doctor was at a loss when my former boss, John, arrived. How did he know? I hadn't told anyone about my illness after Richard's cold response. You think I'll pity you because you're sick? John asked for my room number, and upon hearing of my death, he shakily called my parents. A day later, they took my ashes home. During this time, Richard neither appeared nor called. John, eyes red with anger, lamented. Richard is a monster. I should have stopped Emily from resigning. My father, hunched over, clutched my ashes. John, let's take Emily home. Home! I followed them, weeping. I regretted everything, my reckless pursuit of love, my sacrifices for nothing. My funeral was simple. My parents wanted me to rest in peace after a tumultuous life. Daughter, why didn't you tell us you were sick? It breaks my heart to think of you passing away alone in the hospital. My father wept. My mother, wiping her tears, scolded him. She needs to rest in peace. Don't make her restless. Though scolding, she soon embraced him, both crying bitterly. Overnight, they had aged, their hair turning gray. I couldn't bear to watch, turning away to see Richard and Lisa holding hands. Lisa, celebrating her impending freedom, took Richard on a trip. He, no longer the busy lawyer, ignored countless calls to focus solely on her. Yet sometimes he would look lost, wondering if my parents' numerous calls meant something had happened. Lisa would feign annoyance. You promised to focus on me. It's just your wife's ploy to get your attention. Richard agreed. She's so paranoid. And they would immerse themselves in the scenery, forgetting about the bones resting in the earth. John, watching from a distance, muttered, Richard, you think indulging in pleasure is worthwhile? Richard's voice came through. What nonsense are you spouting? You bribed a judge to win a case for a criminal. The dirty money is all spent on your old flame. What if this comes to light? What do you want? Richard was panicking. I want you dead. John gritted his teeth. You promised to treat Emily well. Now she's dead, you should join her in hell. Emily is dead? Richard looked like he had been struck by lightning, collapsing to the ground, seemingly in shock. I was just jealous. I wanted her to depend on me. You're lying. I just wanted to use Lisa to provoke her, to make her cherish me more. I didn't want her to die. You must be lying. Seeing this, my head throbbed. John wasn't just my former boss, he was my ex-boyfriend. I couldn't remember anything. John, eyes red with anger, vowed, I won't let you off. Chapter 5. John's anger was genuine. In our circle, many were self-serving, but he was defending a deceased ex-girlfriend with no value to him. We must have had something. I scrutinized his actions and expressions. It had been years since we last met, but he was just as I remembered when I first joined his firm. Our first meeting was during my internship. He was my mentor. I secured a job after graduation, and he soon got promoted. Suddenly, a memory flashed. After leaving the firm, I helped Richard establish our practice for 3 years before becoming a housewife. We were in the same circle, so why did it feel like Richard and I had no connection during those years? You're meeting your old flame behind my back while pregnant. Are you regretting it? Richard's twisted, angry face flashed in my mind. He slapped me hard, causing me to stumble and hit my lower back on the table, blood pouring from my pants. Had I been pregnant? I thought I was infertile. Richard had said only he would want a barren woman like me. My head ached. More flashes. Your wife had a miscarriage and can't conceive again. Richard held my hand. I'm sorry, Emily. I was angry, not intending to hurt you. I'll love you even without a child. But I sat there, crying silently. Over time, Richard grew impatient, blaming me. If you hadn't met John, would I have pushed you? Don't you bear any responsibility? Emily, was it for my career or because you couldn't let go of your ex? You know the answer. Stop giving me the cold shoulder. Is the miscarriage all my fault? His words stung, over and over. Let's get a divorce, Richard. Upon discharge, I asked to end our marriage, but Richard refused. In the ensuing struggle, I hit my head again, losing the memory. Now, I remembered everything. I had been with John, but he ended it for his career. Then I met Richard, a law student from a rural background, heartbroken from being dumped by his college sweetheart for the dean's son. His ambition attracted me, and I left my job to help him start his practice. But he became ruthless, stealing John's clients and breaking the law to win cases. John wanted to report him, so I, pregnant, pleaded with John, only for Richard to find out, leading to the miscarriage. Richard, fearing I'd remember and leave him, convinced me to stay home, slowly breaking my spirit. I was once so bright and proud. Now, after years of emotional abuse and isolation, I had become this timid person. I felt a surge of hatred. Richard, insecure and jealous of my past, had manipulated and abused me under the guise of love. If I had remembered any of this, I would have fought him to the bitter end. But now, I was dead, and he was alive. Why? Chapter 6. I watched Richard frantically call my father, looking like a madman. His body was curled up, his hands shaking so much he could barely hold the phone. Dad! Is Emily really dead? You must be lying. My daughter has nothing to do with you. My father replied coldly, hanging up without hesitation. No matter how many times Richard called back, my father remained resolute. Richard alternated between crying and laughing. Lisa approached, gently embracing him. Richard, you still have me. I will never leave you again. But Richard shoved her away, glaring at her with hatred. It's all your fault. Lisa, with a soft, pitiful smile, replied. We're just friends. Emily was always too jealous. Besides, it was her ex-boyfriend who told you about her death. Who knows if they conspired together to deceive you? Clinging to this idea like a drowning man to a straw, Richard's eyes lit up. You're right. Emily must have remembered everything and teamed up with John to set me up. If she's dead, I need to see her body. Lisa quietly agreed, once again gently embracing him. Richard buried his head in her shoulder. Lisa, you're all I have left. Richard, I won't be jealous like Emily. I'll divorce my husband and always stay by your side as a friend. She soothed him with her words. Their relationship had crossed the line. Just moments ago, Richard had been blaming Lisa, and now they were involved again? I felt sick watching this. Despicable people, shifting the blame onto a deceased woman with just a few words. What made me even more nauseous was that the next day, Richard took Lisa to my hometown. He had never been willing to visit my hometown after our marriage. Through asking around, he managed to find my grave. Chapter 7. Sir, this is the one. Please dig it up. Richard had hired several local workers, pointing to my grave. The workers were startled. We can't do this. It's heartless. This is the grave of old Sue's daughter. You can't seek revenge like this. Richard was furious. I'm her husband. Just do as I say. You must be joking. Sue's husband never visited, and you're here with another woman. They gestured to Lisa, standing behind Richard. Richard's face turned livid. Stop wasting time. I'll pay you extra. At that moment, my father approached with a stick, hitting Richard on the head. Someone said you were asking about Emily's grave. She's dead, and you still won't leave her in peace? Are you even human? Lisa dodged, threatening. This is assault. I'm Emily's husband. I have the right to handle her affairs. I need to see her body. Spit. You dare bring this woman here. I'll beat you to death and serve time. My father struck Richard more ferociously. Richard, in a desperate attempt to protect Lisa, snatched the stick and kicked my father to the ground, all while putting on an act of genuine sorrow. I wanted to rush to my father, to tell him it wasn't worth it. These despicable people weren't worth dirtying his hands or risking his health. He had done enough for me. But I was already dead. Father, I don't believe Emily is dead. She and John must be conspiring against me. If you don't produce her, I will keep causing trouble. He threatened my father, his stubbornness infuriating. Aren't the deceased supposed to become vengeful spirits? I wanted to become one, to tear out his throat and drag him into endless torment. Richard, you truly are a fool. Thankfully, John arrived in time, throwing my medical records and death certificate at Richard's face, then helping my father up. But Richard, without even looking, ripped the documents and screamed, "You're lying!" John grabbed him by the throat. "Stop deluding yourself. You're too scared to face the truth. You destroyed her for a woman who despised you, and now you're paying the price." John slapped him hard. Richard staggered and fell, crying, "Be a man and leave her grave in peace. Your law practice made you rich, but at what cost?" Richard just cried, unable to respond. "Get lost. If you don't want to see your efforts go up in flames." Lisa, looking disgusted, helped Richard up. "Uncle, as long as I'm here, no one will bully Emily." She promised my father, and they left together. Chapter 8. John's fierce defense made me wonder if there was more to our breakup. Was there another reason? I couldn't figure it out. I floated in this strange dimension, witnessing events unfold. I watched John on the phone saying something. Minutes later, Richard, on a train, erupted. What? He acted so fast? The evidence is submitted? It was an old case. A year ago, Richard had defended a prominent local developer accused of assault. The developer promised $5 million if Richard could win. Tempted, Richard bribed a judge, fabricated evidence, and the developer walked free. The victim, devastated, took her own life. Even in death, the thought made me furious. Richard, without my oversight, had become this despicable. He had forgotten the ethics of law. John had gathered evidence of Richard's bribery and submitted it to the authorities, causing Richard to panic on the train. Lisa, while soothing him, had a look of contempt. Interesting. She had left Richard for a richer man in college and now manipulated him for money. Richard had vented his frustrations on me while doting on Lisa. Richard justified to John over the phone. "I truly loved Emily. I want to atone for my mistakes. Do you want her name tarnished by being tied to me? And the money and gifts for your ex? I was avenging myself. I wanted to ruin her marriage. Can you stop pursuing this? You're disgusting." John replied and hung up. Richard was left stunned, unaware Lisa had quietly left. Chapter 9. Richard became infamous. The old assault case, once closed, had resurfaced when the victim's family demanded justice, coupled with allegations of bribery. Public outrage was immense. The media frenzy was relentless. Despicable. Defending a criminal. If the law can't deliver justice, what can we trust? One corrupt lawyer ruins the system. Innocent lawyers are suffering because of him. Outraged lawyers and judges demanded a thorough investigation into Richard. His shady dealings were exposed, and Richard was terrified. "Lisa, how much of the money and items I gave you are left? Get them for me." Lisa dodged. "Luxury items lose value. The money is spent." Richard grabbed her throat. "Get it now. Your husband hasn't divorced you. Without the $2 million, he won't let you go." Lisa remained defiant. "I spent everything. There's nothing left. Damn it, I spent all my money on you. Now I can't bribe anyone." Just then, police broke in. "Richard, you're under arrest for bribery. Come with us." They cuffed him. No matter how he glared at Lisa, he was powerless. Tears streamed down his face. If Emily were alive, she wouldn't treat me like this. He rambled about my virtues to the disinterested officers. An officer scoffed. "Your wife was great, but you cheated." Richard was shocked. "How do you know? We've read your expos online. Everyone thinks you deserve this." Richard tried to justify. "I was busy working. Time is money. Coming home for dinner shows love, right? I gave her a home." The officer laughed. "You neglected your wife, gave everything to your mistress, and left your sick wife alone." The car echoed with disdainful remarks. "You don't understand. I had to bind her to me. She'd be moved if she knew. Hearing this, I wished I could rise from the dead and throttle him. Chapter 10. Richard's downfall was swift. He was soon transferred to the prosecutor's office. If convicted, he faced at least 10 years in prison and a lifetime ban from practicing law. Desperate, he refused to confess and accused John. Soon, facing an extended detention, the prosecutor released him due to insufficient evidence. I was puzzled. John was known for thoroughness. Why wasn't Richard taken down? I continued to watch from my dimension. Returning home, Richard found his house ransacked. Confused, he called out, "Emily, why didn't you clean?" Minutes later, he remembered I was gone. Collapsing, he wept. "I'll never doubt you again. I've lost everything. If only you were alive. Why mourn me now? I had no use to you." He seemed to hear my thoughts. "I love you. I really do." Is that love? No, it's control. Love is respect, support, and partnership. Not cheating, manipulation, or breaking one's spirit. Richard, you don't know what love is. Chapter 11. Exhausted from crying, Richard called Lisa. "What did you do to my house? Put it back the way Emily left it, or else." Lisa laughed. "Stop pretending. We rolled in her bed when she was hospitalized." Richard's face contorted. "Shut up." Lisa, unafraid, retorted. "Your reputation is ruined. I took everything valuable as compensation." Ignoring his rage, she revealed, "My husband and I are fine. We planned to extort $2 million from you, but you wanted me to pay. I sold your valuables for $2 million. We're even." Humming, she hung up. I turned to Lisa's space. She was laughing with her husband. "What an idiot. He kept paying while cursing me. You won't despise me, right?" Her husband smiled. "Dad retired and we both lost our jobs. I rely on you. How could I?" They embraced, laughing. Richard, seething, could do nothing. "Emily, I was wrong. You were the only one who treated me well." He seemed unwell, retreating into fantasies of me whenever faced with hardship. If I were alive, I'd divorce and imprison him. Richard, pocketing a knife, left. At Lisa's, he entered with the code and attacked them. Lisa's husband pushed her out, running for his life. Lisa screamed. "You were supposed to be arrested. John lied." She died, eyes wide in disbelief. "This is for Emily. Without you, we'd be happy." He chased her husband but was caught by the police. John resubmitted Richard's bribery evidence. Richard was convicted of murder and bribery, sentenced to death. He didn't appeal, only saying, "Emily, I'm coming to join you." How repulsive. Everything had aligned to perfectly. Chapter 12. When John laid sunflowers on my grave, everything became clear. Emily, love makes one blind. Richard was a fool. A little push from Lisa's husband drove him mad. "I avenged you, Emily. I timed it perfectly. They're both dead. You can deal with them below. I'll recover your shared assets for your parents. Don't worry. I'll take care of them." His words brought tears. No one had spoken to me so gently in ages. Why was John so foolish? We broke up long ago. Emily, the career excuse was a lie. I was misdiagnosed with a terminal illness. I didn't want to burden you. By the time I realized it was a mistake, you were happily engaged. You looked so happy. I only threatened Richard to treat you well and prayed for your happiness. A misunderstanding had cost us a lifetime. I cried. If we had married, maybe we'd have our own regrets. But now, I believed in his sincerity. Next, I found myself in a new place. A figure above me spoke. Emily, your ordeal is over. You'll find happiness in your next life. To my surprise, Richard knelt beside me. I'll treat her well next time. He vowed. I slapped him. No, I never want to see you again. The figure laughed. Don't worry. He's headed to hell for his sins. Emily, wait here for John, then you can reincarnate together. I felt a surge of joy. Watching Richard weep, I declared. In life and death, we shall never meet again.